The autumn wind cut through the streets of Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood like a knife, carrying with it the scent of Lake Michigan and the promise of an early winter. Dead leaves skittered across the pavement, collecting in corners and doorways of the limestone mansions that lined the historic district. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain that would surely come before nightfall. Elena Rivera pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she hurried down the sidewalk, her worn sneakers making barely a sound against the concrete. At 29 years old, she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that time was the most precious commodity she possessed. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her hands, rough from years of cleaning solutions and hard work, clutched a small backpack containing her work uniform and a packed lunch she'd made at 5 that morning. She checked her phone. 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes to catch the bus that would take her to the Moretti estate. If she missed it, the next wouldn't come for another 20 minutes, and Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, didn't tolerate lateness. Elena's mind drifted to the morning she'd left behind. Miguel, her 7-year-old son, had still been asleep when she'd kissed his forehead, his small body curled beneath his favorite blanket, the one with fading astronauts that he'd had since he was 3. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who lived in the apartment below theirs, would make sure Miguel got breakfast and caught the school bus. It was an arrangement born of necessity, one of many compromises Elena had made since becoming a single mother 4 years ago. The memory of her husband, Carlos, flickered through her mind like an old photograph, his smile, his laugh, the way he used to lift Miguel onto his shoulders. A construction accident on a high-rise site in the Loop had taken him away, leaving Elena with a funeral bill, mounting debt, and a son who still sometimes asked when Daddy was coming home. She shook her head, pushing the memories aside. There was no time for grief, not when bills needed paying and Miguel needed shoes that actually fit, and the landlord had already warned her about next month's rent. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes, and Elena climbed aboard, swiping her transit card and finding a seat near the back. Through the window, she watched the city transform as they traveled north. The modest buildings of her neighborhood gave way to increasingly grand structures, boutique shops, art galleries, restaurants with names in French and Italian. This was a different Chicago, one where people didn't check their bank balance before buying groceries. 40 minutes later, Elena stood before the iron gates of the Moretti estate. Even after 6 months of working here, the sheer scale of the property still took her breath away. The mansion rose 3 stories, its facade a masterpiece of Italian Renaissance architecture. Manicured lawns stretched out on either side, and through the morning mist, she could make out the shapes of marble statuary and a fountain that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 years. She pressed the intercom button. Identification, came the curt voice of Marcus, one of the security personnel. Elena Rivera, housekeeping. The gate buzzed open, and Elena walked up the long driveway, her footsteps crunching on the gravel. She'd learned not to use the front entrance. Staff entered through a side door near the kitchen. It was one of many unspoken rules in this world, of old money and older secrets. Mrs. Chen was already in the staff room, checking her clipboard with the precision of a military general. The head housekeeper was a petite woman in her 60s, originally from Hong Kong, who ran the household with efficiency and demanded nothing less than perfection from her team. "Elena, good morning," Mrs. Chen said without looking up. "You'll be handling the second floor today. Mr. Moretti is working from home, so the study and adjacent rooms are off limits until this afternoon. The guest suites need full attention. We're expecting visitors this weekend." "Yes, Mrs. Chen." Elena changed into her uniform, a simple gray dress with a white apron, and gathered her cleaning supplies. As she pushed her cart toward the service elevator, she caught a glimpse of herself in one of the many mirrors that lined the hallways. She looked tired, she thought, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. The second floor was a maze of rooms, each more luxurious than the last. Elena worked methodically, the way she'd been trained. Dust first, then surfaces, then floors. She changed linens, cleaned bathrooms until they sparkled, arranged fresh flowers in crystal vases. The work was monotonous but meditative, and she let her mind wander to the small pleasures that made life bearable. Miguel's upcoming school play, the novel she was reading in borrowed moments, the hope that maybe someday things would get easier. She was polishing a mahogany dresser in one of the guest rooms when she heard voices in the hallway. Elena froze, recognizing the deep baritone that could only belong to one person, Vincent Moretti. She'd seen him, of course. It was impossible to work in his house and not encounter the owner, but their interactions had been minimal, limited to polite nods and the occasional "excuse me" when she needed to clean a room he was occupying. He was an imposing figure, standing well over 6 feet, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. At 42, he moved with the confidence of a man who had never heard the word no, and wouldn't have accepted it if he had. Elena knew what people said about Vincent Moretti. The whispers were impossible to avoid, that he was connected to organized activities, that his legitimate businesses were fronts for less legal enterprises, that he was dangerous in ways that went beyond physical threat. But she'd also noticed things others might not, the way he donated anonymously to children's hospitals, how he'd quietly paid for the funeral of a groundskeeper's daughter, the books on philosophy and history that lined his private study. The voices moved past her door, and Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She returned to her work, finishing the guest rooms before taking her lunch break in the staff dining area. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Elena was buffing the marble floor in the main hallway when her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She glanced at it quickly, expecting a message from Mrs. Patterson. Instead, there were 3 missed calls from Thomas Edison Elementary School. Her heart stuttered. Miguel. She stepped into a small alcove and called back immediately, her hands suddenly shaking. Mrs. Rivera? The school secretary's voice was tight with concern. We've been trying to reach you. Miguel didn't board the bus after school. We're hoping he went home with you. The world tilted. What? No, I'm at work. He always takes the bus. He knows he's supposed to take the bus. We've checked everywhere, Mrs. Rivera. The teacher did final attendance at dismissal, and Miguel was present. But when they loaded the buses, he wasn't there. We've searched the building and the grounds. I'm afraid we need to consider that he may have left the property. Elena's phone nearly slipped from her trembling fingers. I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Mrs. Rivera, we've also called the authorities. They're sending officers to the school and to your residence. She ended the call, her mind racing through 1,000 terrible possibilities. Miguel wouldn't just leave. He was a good boy, responsible despite his young age. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. Elena's phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. Hello? The voice that came through was mechanically distorted, like something from a nightmare. Mrs. Rivera, you need to listen very carefully. Your son is with us. He's safe for now, but that depends entirely on your cooperation. The hallway seemed to spin. Elena pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Miguel, where's my son? What have you done to him? Nothing yet. And nothing will happen if you do exactly what we tell you. We need $200,000. Cash. You have 48 hours. 200? I don't have that kind of money. I'm a housekeeper. I barely make $30,000 a year. I can't. That's not our problem, Mrs. Rivera. Figure it out. And here's the most important part. No authorities. No police. No FBI. If we see badges, if we hear sirens, if you breathe a word of this to anyone official, your son disappears. Permanently. Do you understand? Tears streamed down Elena's face. Please. He's just a little boy. He's 7 years old. Please don't hurt him. 48 hours. We'll call with drop-off instructions. Remember, no cops, we're watching. The line went dead. Elena stood in the alcove, her entire body shaking. $200,000. 48 hours. No police. The equations were impossible, the mathematics of desperation that had no solution. She made $2,300 a month before taxes. She had maybe $800 in her checking account. No savings. Those had been depleted during Carlos's funeral and the months of struggling afterward. No family with money. No one to turn to. No one except. The thought formed before she could stop it. She was standing in a mansion worth millions, working for a man who probably spent more on a single suit than she made in 6 months. A man with connections, with resources, with power that extended far beyond the legitimate business empire he presented to the world. A man who was, by all accounts, dangerous. But what choice did she have? The authorities couldn't help. The kidnappers had made that clear. Alone, banks didn't lend that kind of money to housemaids with no collateral. Credit cards? She'd maxed those out years ago. Friends? Everyone she knew was working just as hard as she was, living paycheck to paycheck in a city that showed no mercy to the poor. Vincent Moretti was her only option. It was insane. It was desperate. It was probably going to get her fired or worse, but for Miguel she would do anything. Elena wiped her tears and returned to work, her mind churning through possibilities. She couldn't just walk up to Vincent Moretti and ask for $200,000. Security would escort her out before she finished the sentence. Mrs. Chen would think she'd lost her mind, and even if she managed to speak to him directly, why would he help her? She was nobody to him, just another employee in a house full of them. She needed a different approach, something that would get his attention privately, without causing a scene or alerting others. Something that would make him listen long enough to hear her plea. As she cleaned the formal dining room in preparation for the evening meal, an idea took shape. Vincent Moretti dined alone most nights, right here in this room. The staff served in silence, refilling wine glasses and bringing courses according to Mrs. Chen's strict protocols. The dining table was enormous, designed to seat 20, but Mr. Moretti typically sat at the head, surrounded by empty chairs and the echoes of conversations that never happened. What if she could slip him a note? Something discreet, something only he would see. It was risky. If Mrs. Chen caught her, she'd be terminated immediately. But Elena was past the point of worrying about her job. Her son's life was at stake. The evening approached with agonizing slowness. Elena went through the motions of her work like a ghost, present, but not really there. Her hands moved automatically. Dust, wipe, polish, while her mind spun in circles of fear and desperate planning. Every time her phone remained silent, it felt like both a relief and a curse. The kidnappers hadn't called again. Miguel was still out there somewhere, frightened and alone, probably crying for her. The thought nearly broke her. At 6:30 p.m., Mrs. Chen assembled the evening service staff. Elena had volunteered to assist, claiming that Maria, the usual server, had mentioned not feeling well. It was a lie, but a useful one. Mrs. Chen had raised an eyebrow but allowed it. They were short-staffed, and Elena had served before during busy periods. Remember, Mrs. Chen instructed, Mr. Moretti values his privacy during meals. Serve efficiently and silently. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make unnecessary noise. Antonio will handle the wine and main courses. Elena, you'll manage the bread service and clearing between courses. Elena nodded, her heart hammering. In the staff bathroom, she'd written her plea on a small piece of paper torn from her notepad, folding it into a tiny square. The words were simple, direct, born from a mother's desperation. They took my son. Please don't call the cops. I have nowhere else to turn. Elena Rivera. Housekeeping. Now that paper felt like it was burning a hole in her apron pocket. Vincent Moretti entered the dining room at precisely 7 p.m. as was his custom. He wore a tailored charcoal suit despite being home, his appearance immaculate as always. Elena kept her eyes lowered as he took his seat, her pulse racing so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Antonio brought the first course, a butternut squash soup with crispy sage. Elena approached with the bread basket, her movements careful and measured. As she placed the basket on the table near Mr. Moretti's left hand, she made her move. With a gesture that took less than a second, she slipped the folded note beneath the linen napkin that lined the basket. She stepped back, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Had he noticed? Had Mrs. Chen seen? Had she just made the most catastrophic mistake of her life? Vincent Moretti ate in silence, occasionally glancing at his phone or the papers he'd brought to the table. The minutes stretched like hours. Elena cleared the soup bowls, brought water, performed every task with mechanical precision, while her internal world screamed with anxiety. Then she saw it, Vincent's hand reaching casually toward the bread basket. He selected a roll, and in the process his fingers brushed against the folded paper. His movement didn't change, didn't hesitate, but Elena saw the moment of recognition. A slight pause, a subtle shift in his posture. He palmed the note smoothly, bringing his hand to his lap beneath the table. To anyone else, it would look like nothing more than a man adjusting his napkin, but Elena knew. He had it. The second course arrived, pan-seared salmon with autumn vegetables. Elena served it with trembling hands, afraid to look at him, afraid not to. When she finally glanced up, Vincent Moretti was looking directly at her. His expression was unreadable, his dark eyes intense and analytical, like he was solving a complex equation. Then he looked down at his plate and continued eating. The meal progressed through 3 more courses. Elena performed her duties in a fog of terror and hope. What was he thinking? Would he help? Would he ignore her plea? Would he report her to Mrs. Chen for the inappropriate breach of protocol? At 8:15 p.m., Vincent Moretti stood, indicating the meal was finished. Mrs. Chen appeared to oversee the clearing of the table, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Elena focused on stacking dishes, keeping her breathing steady, pretending everything was normal, even though her entire world was collapsing. As the staff filed out toward the kitchen, Vincent's voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Chen, the service this evening was excellent. Please pass my compliments to the kitchen staff." "Of course, Mr. Moretti. Will you require anything else this evening?" "No, thank you, that will be all." Elena carried her tray of dishes through the swinging door, her legs barely holding her upright. She'd done it. The note was delivered. Now all she could do was wait and pray that the most powerful, and potentially most dangerous man she'd ever met, would have mercy on a desperate mother. The staff cleaned up the kitchen and dining areas, a process that took another hour. Elena moved through it automatically, responding when spoken to, performing her tasks, all while her mind screamed with worry. Where was Miguel right now? Was he scared? Was he hurt? Did he know she was trying to save him? At 9:45 p.m., Elena changed out of her uniform and prepared to leave. The bus ride home seemed impossible. How could she return to that empty apartment knowing Miguel wouldn't be there? But where else could she go? She was heading toward the staff exit when Marcus, the security guard, intercepted her. "Ms. Rivera, Mr. Moretti would like to see you in his study." Elena's breath caught. Now. Her legs felt like water as she followed Marcus through the mansion's corridors. They passed through areas she'd never been, ascending a staircase to the third floor where Vincent's private quarters were located. The study was at the end of a long hallway, its double doors carved with intricate designs. Marcus knocked once, then opened the door. "Ms. Rivera, sir." "Thank you, Marcus. That will be all." The security guard left and Elena stood in the doorway, feeling like she might collapse at any moment. The study was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, leather furniture arranged before a fireplace where flames crackled softly. Vincent Moretti stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the Chicago skyline. "Close the door," he said quietly. Elena did, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. Vincent turned to face her, and for the first time she saw him not as her employer but as the man everyone warned about. Powerful, calculating, potentially merciless. He held her note between two fingers. "Sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs. Elena sat, perching on the edge, her hands twisted together in her lap. Vincent moved to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against it, crossing his arms, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. For Miguel, she could face anything. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low and controlled. "And Elena, don't leave anything out." The fire crackled softly in the study's fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls lined with leather-bound books. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like a constellation fallen to earth, the city lights stretching endlessly toward the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. Elena sat rigidly in the leather chair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Vincent Moretti remained leaning against his desk, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The note she'd written, that desperate plea scrawled on cheap notepad paper, lay on the polished mahogany surface behind him, looking impossibly small and fragile in this room of power and wealth. "Start from the beginning," Vincent said, his voice quiet but commanding. "What happened to your son?" Elena took a shaky breath, trying to organize her thoughts through the fog of terror that had consumed her since that phone call. "His name is Miguel. He's 7 years old. He goes to Thomas Edison Elementary, about 3 miles from where we live in Lakeview. Every day he takes the school bus home and my neighbor checks on him until I get back from work." She paused, her throat constricting. Vincent's gaze never wavered, patient but intense. "This afternoon around 3:15 the school called. They said Miguel was marked present for final attendance, but when the buses loaded, he was gone. They searched everywhere. The building, the playground, the parking lot. He just vanished. And then," Vincent prompted. "Then they called." Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Unknown number." The voice was distorted like they were using some kind of device. "They said they have Miguel. They want $200,000 in cash. I have 48 hours and—" Her voice cracked. "They said if I contact the authorities, if they see any police involvement, I'll never see him again." Vincent was silent for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Did they say anything else? Any details about why they took him? Or how they want the exchange to happen?" Elena shook her head. They said they'd call back with instructions for the drop-off. That was all. Mr. Moretti, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I don't have $200,000. I don't have any way to get that kind of money. The banks won't give me a loan. I've tried before for much less. I have no family who could help. Everyone I know is struggling just like me, and I can't go to the police because they specifically warned you not to, Vincent finished. He pushed away from the desk and moved to the window, his silhouette backlit by the city lights. Elena, do you understand who I am? What people say about me? She swallowed hard. I've heard things. Yes. Then you understand that by bringing this to me, you're entering a world that doesn't play by normal rules. A world where favors come with prices, where information is currency, and where trust can be the difference between life and death. I understand, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. But Miguel is my whole world. He's all I have left. His father died 4 years ago in a construction accident. It's just been the two of us since then. I would do anything, pay any price, take any risk, if it means getting him back safely. Vincent turned from the window to face her fully. In the firelight, his features seemed carved from stone, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something Elena couldn't quite identify. Pain, recognition, memory. Tell me about Miguel, he said unexpectedly. Not about what happened today. Tell me about him. The request caught Elena off guard. He's smart. Too smart sometimes. He asks questions about everything. How airplanes fly, why the sky is blue, where stars go during the day. He wants to be an astronaut when he grows up. A sad smile touched her lips. He has his father's curiosity, his kindness. Miguel befriends everyone. The other kids at school, the elderly couple who run the corner store, even the stray cat that hangs around our building. He names everything. The cat is Captain Whiskers. And you work here to support him. I work 3 jobs, actually, Elena admitted. Housekeeping here during the day, I clean office buildings 2 evenings a week, and I pick up weekend shifts at a diner in my neighborhood when I can. It's not enough, it's never quite enough, but I'm trying to save for his education, for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, for all the things he deserves. Vincent walked to a cabinet near the fireplace and poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He didn't offer Elena any, which she appreciated. Her stomach was too knotted to handle anything right now. You said the voice was distorted, male or female. I couldn't tell. The distortion made it impossible. Background noise? Anything that might indicate location? Elena closed her eyes, trying to replay the terrifying conversation in her mind. It was quiet. No traffic sounds, no voices. Maybe a slight echo? Like they were in an empty room or a large space, and they knew your name, knew where Miguel went to school, knew enough to grab him at a specific time when there would be confusion and opportunity. Vincent took a sip of his drink, his expression thoughtful. This wasn't random, Elena. Someone planned this carefully. The implication sent ice through her veins. But why? I'm nobody. I have nothing worth taking. Why would anyone target my son? Vincent set his glass down and moved to his desk, pulling out a leather chair and sitting for the first time since Elena had entered the study. He steepled his fingers, regarding her with that penetrating gaze. That's the question we need to answer. Because in my experience, kidnappers don't demand $200,000 from someone who makes $30,000 a year, unless there's another angle we're not seeing. What do you mean? I mean, Vincent said carefully, that you work in my house. You have access to my private residence, you see things, hear things. It's possible, likely even, that Miguel was taken not because of who you are, but because of who you work for. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. You think this is about you? That they took Miguel to get to you somehow? It's one possibility. Another is that someone believes you have information they want, or access to something valuable, or perhaps they think I would pay to protect one of my employees. He paused. How long have you worked here? 6 months. I was hired through an agency that Mrs. Chen uses for staffing. And in those 6 months, have you noticed anything unusual? Anyone asking questions about your work, about this house, about my schedule or activities? Elena thought back through the monotonous routine of the past half year. No, nothing like that. I mostly keep to myself. I do my work and go home. Vincent stood and moved to a large map of Chicago mounted on the wall near his desk. He studied it for a moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. The person answered on the first ring. Marcus, I need you to pull security footage from the main gate, the perimeter cameras, and the staff entrance for the past week. Send everything to my private server. Also, compile a list of everyone who has been granted access to the property during that time. Deliveries, contractors, visitors, everyone. He paused. No, I'll explain later. Just get it done within the hour. He ended the call and turned back to Elena. We're going to figure out who did this and why. And we're going to get Miguel back. But I need you to understand something. The moment you walked through that door, the moment you gave me that note, you stepped into my world. There's no going back from this. Are you prepared for that? Elena met his gaze without flinching. I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Vincent studied her for another long moment, then gave a slight nod, as if she'd passed some kind of test. All right, first we gather information. I have resources, people who owe me favors, who have eyes and ears throughout this city. If someone grabbed a 7-year-old boy in broad daylight, someone saw something. He pulled out his phone again and began typing rapidly. I'm reaching out to contacts in various sectors. Law enforcement, private security, people who monitor activities that don't always make the news. We'll cast a wide net. But won't that alert the kidnappers? Elena asked anxiously. They said no police. I'm not calling the police, Vincent assured her. These are private channels, discreet inquiries. The people I'm contacting understand the value of confidentiality. Trust me, Elena. I've built my entire life on knowing who to trust and who to avoid. He made several more calls, each conversation brief and coded in ways Elena didn't fully understand. She caught fragments, the package, recent acquisitions, unusual movements in the Lakeview area, but the full meaning eluded her. What didn't elude her was the efficiency with which Vincent operated, the network of connections he activated with a few phone calls. Between calls, Vincent asked her more questions. Miguel's exact schedule, the route the school bus took, the names of his teachers and friends, details about their apartment building and neighborhood. Elena answered everything, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the slight kindling of hope that maybe, just maybe, this powerful man could actually help her. Your neighbor, Vincent said, reviewing notes he'd taken on his phone. Mrs. Patterson, how well do you know her? Very well. She's lived in our building for 20 years. She's like a grandmother to Miguel. She would never— I'm not suggesting she's involved, Vincent interrupted gently. But I need to know everyone in Miguel's orbit. Who he trusts, who has access to him, who might have information about his routines. At 10:30 p.m., Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression sharpening. Marcus has the security footage ready. Come with me. Elena followed him through the mansion to a room she'd never seen before. A sophisticated security center with multiple monitors displaying camera feeds from around the property. Marcus was there, along with another man Elena didn't recognize, both studying the screens intently. Show me the past 72 hours, Vincent instructed. Anyone unusual, any patterns that stand out. They spent the next hour reviewing footage. Elena watched faces flicker across the screens. Delivery drivers, landscapers, maintenance workers, all going about their business. Nothing seemed out of place until Marcus froze a frame from 2 days earlier. Here, he pointed. This van. It's marked as a telecommunications company, here to check the fiber optic lines. But look at the timestamp. They arrived at 2 p.m. and didn't leave until 6 p.m. 4 hours for a routine check seems excessive. Vincent leaned closer. Run the company name. I want to know if it's legitimate. While Marcus worked, Vincent turned to Elena. Did you see this van when you were working that day? Elena tried to remember. Tuesday afternoon. She'd been cleaning the East Wing guest suites. Nowhere near the main entrance or service areas. I don't think so. But I wouldn't have noticed unless I happened to be outside. Marcus looked up from his computer. The company exists. But here's what's interesting. They have no record of a service call to this address on that date. I called their emergency line and spoke to a supervisor. According to their logs, their last visit to this property was 3 months ago for a scheduled maintenance check. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of electronic equipment. Someone impersonated a legitimate company to gain access to the property, Vincent said slowly, his voice dangerous in its calmness. They had 4 hours to observe, to plant surveillance equipment, to gather information about routines and schedules. Marcus, I want every room in this house swept for listening devices and cameras. Start with the areas where household staff typically work and discuss their personal lives. Understanding dawned cold and terrible in Elena's chest. They could have heard me talking about Miguel, about his school, his schedule, everything. It's possible, Vincent confirmed. which would explain how they knew exactly when and where to take him. He pulled out his phone again. I need to make another call. This changes things. He stepped into the hallway, his voice too low for Elena to hear the conversation. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was grim. I've just spoken with someone who has connections to various organizations throughout the city. No one is claiming responsibility for Miguel's kidnapping, which is unusual. When people make moves like this, there's usually some indication. Bragging, territorial posturing, something. But this is silent. Professional. What does that mean? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. It means we're likely dealing with people who operate outside the normal structure of criminal enterprises in this city. They're not part of the established order, which makes them harder to predict, harder to negotiate with, and potentially more desperate. Vincent checked his watch. It's almost midnight. You need to go home. If the kidnappers call again, you need to be there to answer. But here's what's going to happen. I'm assigning 2 of my security personnel to watch your building. They'll be discreet, but they'll be there. If anyone approaches you, if anything unusual happens, they'll intervene. Mr. Moretti, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, he said firmly. This is happening. Additionally, I'm having a technical specialist come to your apartment tomorrow morning to install monitoring equipment on your phone. If the kidnappers call again, we'll be able to trace it, possibly triangulate their location. But they said no police. I'm not police. Everything I'm doing operates in a space the authorities don't touch. Vincent's expression softened slightly. Helena, I know you're scared. I know this is overwhelming. But you came to me for help, and that's what I'm giving you. Trust me to do this my way. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, the first real emotion besides terror that she'd allowed herself to feel since this nightmare began. Why are you doing this? I'm nobody to you. Just someone who cleans your house. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, and something flickered across his face, a memory, a pain quickly suppressed. Let's just say I understand what it's like to fail someone who depends on you. I understand that kind of regret. And unlike some situations in my past, this is one I can actually do something about. The cryptic answer raised more questions than it answered, but Elena didn't press. Whatever Vincent's motivations, they were working in her favor. Marcus will drive you home, Vincent continued. I'll be in touch first thing in the morning. In the meantime, try to get some rest. I know that sounds impossible, but you need to stay strong for when we find Miguel. And Elena? He met her eyes directly. We will find him. The drive back to Lakeview passed in a blur. Marcus drove a discreet sedan, not one of the obvious luxury vehicles that would draw attention in her neighborhood. He pulled up a block away from her building, as Vincent had instructed. The 2 men watching your building are already in position, Marcus told her. One in a parked car on the street, another in a vacant apartment across from yours that we've temporarily secured. If you need anything, if you feel unsafe for any reason, call this number. He handed her a card with a single phone number printed on it. Someone will answer immediately. Elena thanked him and made her way to her building, each step feeling heavier than the last. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Miguel's cereal bowl still in the sink, his backpack hanging on the hook by the door, his sneakers scattered near the couch. Evidence of a normal morning in a life that no longer existed. She sank onto the couch, finally allowing herself to cry. Great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Where was Miguel right now? Was he crying for her? Was he scared? Did he understand what was happening? Her phone buzzed. For a wild, hopeful second, she thought it might be the kidnappers calling back. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. Security in place. You're not alone. VM. Vincent Moretti. Somehow, the simple message provided more comfort than seemed possible. She wasn't facing this nightmare alone anymore. Elena forced herself to eat something. Crackers and cheese, the only food she could stomach. She tried to sleep, but gave up after an hour of staring at the ceiling. Instead, she sat by the window watching the street below, wondering which car held Vincent's security personnel, drawing strange comfort from knowing they were there. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. Hello? The same distorted voice from before. Mrs. Rivera, I hope you've been thinking about our conversation. 40 hours left. Please, Elena begged. Please let me talk to him. Let me hear his voice. I need to know he's okay. There was a pause, then shuffling sounds. Then, faint and frightened. Mama? Miguel? Baby, are you hurt? Are you? I want to come home, Mama. I'm scared. These people. The voice was cut off abruptly, replaced by the mechanical distortion. He's fine. For now. Get the money, Mrs. Rivera. 40 hours. We'll call with final instructions. Wait. Please, I need more time. The line went dead. Elena immediately called the number Marcus had given her. He answered before the second ring. Ms. Rivera? They called. They let me hear Miguel's voice. He's alive. He's scared. But he's alive. Mr. Moretti needs to know immediately. I'm calling him now. Can you send me the exact time of the call? Elena provided the information, her mind clinging to those few precious seconds of Miguel's voice. He was alive. That was what mattered. Everything else could be figured out. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed with another text from Vincent. Technical team will be at your apartment at 7 a.m. to install phone monitoring. We're going to find him, Elena. Get some rest. Tomorrow we hunt. Elena looked at Miguel's empty room, at the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck to the ceiling together, at his collection of library books about space and planets scattered across his small desk. She made a silent promise to her son, wherever he was in this vast, dark city. I'm coming for you, baby. Mr. Moretti and I are coming for you. Just hold on a little longer. Outside her window, Chicago slept, unaware that somewhere in its sprawling expanse a 7-year-old boy waited for rescue, and a desperate mother had allied herself with the city's most dangerous man to save him. The hunt had begun. Dawn broke over Chicago with reluctant gray light, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. Elena hadn't slept. She sat at her small kitchen table staring at her phone, willing it to ring again so she could hear Miguel's voice, even as she dreaded what the kidnappers might say. At precisely 7 a.m., there was a soft knock at her door. Elena checked the peephole and saw 2 men in plain clothes, one carrying a professional-looking equipment case. She opened the door. Ms. Rivera, I'm David Chen, technical specialist. Mr. Moretti sent us. The man was in his 30s with efficient movements and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. This is my colleague, James. We're here to set up the monitoring equipment on your phone. May we come in? Elena stepped aside, and the 2 men entered her modest apartment. If they noticed the worn furniture, the patched curtains, or the vast difference between this space and the Moretti mansion, they gave no indication. David set his case on the coffee table and opened it, revealing an array of electronic equipment Elena didn't recognize. This won't take long, David explained as he worked. We're installing software that will allow us to trace incoming calls in real time. It's completely invisible to the caller. They won't know we're listening. We'll also set up a recording system so we can analyze every word, every background sound. He glanced at her with sympathy. Mr. Moretti briefed us on the situation. I have a daughter about your son's age. We're going to do everything we can to help bring him home. Elena's throat tightened. Thank you. While David worked on her phone, James swept the apartment with a small electronic device. Checking for surveillance equipment, he explained. If they knew enough to grab your son, they might have planted something here too. The sweep came up clean, which provided small comfort. 20 minutes later, both men had finished their work. All set, David said, handing Elena her phone back. It looked exactly the same as before. When they call again, answer normally. Keep them talking as long as possible. Every second helps us narrow down the location. Try to listen for background sounds. Traffic, trains, airplanes, even ambient noise from heating systems or machinery. All of it helps. After they left, Elena forced herself to shower and change clothes. She called Mrs. Chen to explain she had a family emergency and wouldn't be able to work for the next few days. The head housekeeper's response was surprisingly understanding. Mr. Moretti informed me of your situation, Mrs. Chen said. Her usually stern voice softened with concern. Take whatever time you need, Elena. Your position will be waiting when you return. So Vincent had already handled that detail. Elena felt a complicated mix of gratitude and unease at how efficiently he was managing every aspect of this crisis. She was used to fighting her battles alone, to solving every problem through sheer determination and relentless work. Depending on someone, especially someone as powerful and potentially dangerous as Vincent Moretti, felt both foreign and frighteningly necessary. Her phone rang at 8:15 a.m. Vincent, how are you holding up? He asked. I heard Miguel's voice last night, Elena said, the memory both a comfort and a torment. He's scared, but he's alive. David sent me the recording. We're analyzing it now. Elena, I need you to come to the house. There are some people you need to meet, and we've made progress on the investigation. What kind of progress? Better discussed in person. Marcus is already on his way to pick you up. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself once again entering the Moretti estate, but this time through the front entrance. Marcus led her not to Vincent's study, but to a room on the ground floor she'd never seen. A conference room with a large table, multiple computer screens and walls covered with maps and photographs. Vincent was there along with 3 other people. He'd changed from his usual formal attire into dark jeans and a black sweater, looking less like a businessman and more like someone preparing for action. The transformation was striking. "Elena, thank you for coming," he gestured to the others in the room. "This is my security director, Thomas Wade." A man in his 50s with military bearing nodded to her. Dr. Sarah Kim, forensic analyst. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s gave a brief smile. "And you've already met David Chen, who handled your phone this morning." Elena took a seat at the table, feeling overwhelmed by the professional operation unfolding around her. "Let me bring you up to speed," Vincent began, pointing to one of the screens displaying a map of Chicago. "After you left last night, my team identified the telecommunications van that accessed my property. We tracked it using traffic cameras throughout the city. It was abandoned 2 days ago in a warehouse district near the south branch of the Chicago River." He clicked a remote, and the screen changed to show surveillance footage. "The driver and passenger are visible here. We ran facial recognition through various databases." Another click brought up 2 profile images. Both are independent contractors, not affiliated with any major organization I'm aware of. They've been hired for various jobs over the past few years. Surveillance, information gathering, occasionally more aggressive work. "Who hired them?" Elena asked. "That's where it gets interesting." Vincent pulled up another image, a grainy photo of a man in his mid-30s, well-dressed, getting into an expensive car. "This is Marcus Chen, no relation to David, a financial consultant who works with several legitimate businesses but has connections to less legitimate operations. We have evidence that he hired the surveillance team. What we don't know yet is who's behind Marcus Chen." Dr. Kim spoke up. "We also analyzed the recording from last night's call. The voice distortion is sophisticated but not impossible to work around. I've been running it through audio processing software to strip away the electronic masking. It's going to take more time, but we might be able to identify the actual voice underneath. The background sounds on that call are crucial," David added, pulling up an audio waveform on another screen. "There's a consistent low-frequency hum, likely from a commercial HVAC system. Also, very faint but present, there's a rhythmic sound that could be machinery, or even water pipes. And here," he pointed to a specific section of the waveform, "that's a train. Not close, maybe half a mile away, but distinctive. The timing and duration suggest it's an elevated line, not subway." Thomas Wade stood and moved to the large city map. "Based on those audio markers, we've narrowed potential locations to these areas." He indicated several neighborhoods with red circles, industrial zones with older buildings that would have those HVAC systems, within hearing distance of the elevated train lines. "That gives us approximately 15 square blocks to search." Elena stared at the map, hope and fear warring in her chest. That's still a lot of ground to cover. "And we only have," she checked her watch, "32 hours left. Which is why we're not waiting," Vincent said. He pulled up another image, building blueprints. "We've identified 12 properties in those zones that match our criteria. My team has been conducting discrete surveillance on all of them since 4 a.m. 3 have shown suspicious activity, unusual power consumption, recent changes in access patterns, security measures that seem excessive for supposedly vacant properties." He zoomed in on one particular building. "This warehouse complex is our primary target. It's registered to a shell company that traces back to Marcus Chen. Power records show significant usage despite the building supposedly being unoccupied. And this morning, we observed someone entering with food supplies, enough for multiple people staying for several days." Elena's breath caught. "You think Miguel is there?" "It's our best lead," Vincent confirmed. "But we need to be absolutely certain before we move. If we're wrong, if we alert the kidnappers that we're onto them, they could move Miguel or—" He hesitated, clearly not wanting to complete that sentence in front of Elena, "or accelerate their timeline. So, what do we do?" Vincent's expression was grim, but determined. "We get eyes inside that building. We confirm Miguel's presence, and then we get him out." "How?" Elena asked. "You said we can't involve police. How do we—" "Leave the logistics to me," Vincent interrupted gently. "But Elena, I need you to understand something. This is going to be dangerous. These people have already shown they're willing to kidnap a child. When cornered, they may become desperate. I can't guarantee everything will go smoothly. I don't care about guarantees, Elena said firmly. I care about getting my son back, whatever it takes. Vincent studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. All right. Thomas, what's the plan for surveillance? The security director pulled up a different screen showing what appeared to be drone footage. We have aerial reconnaissance positioning now, using a commercial drone disguised as a hobbyist's equipment. We're also going to need someone on the ground, someone who can get close enough to confirm whether the boy is inside without raising suspicion. I'll do it, Elena said immediately. Elena, Vincent started. No, listen. If Miguel is in there and he sees me, he'll react. You can use that reaction to confirm his presence, and if I can somehow make contact, I can keep him calm. Let him know help is coming. She leaned forward, her voice intense. I've been useless this entire time watching other people try to save my son. Let me do something, let me help. Vincent exchanged glances with Thomas, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Vincent nodded. All right, but you follow instructions exactly. Thomas and I will be with you every step of the way. Over the next 2 hours, they refined the plan. Elena would approach the warehouse complex posing as a lost delivery driver, giving her a reason to walk the perimeter and look through windows. She'd wear a concealed camera and microphone so the team could see and hear everything she did. Thomas would coordinate from a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, while Vincent would be in a second vehicle, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The most important thing, Thomas emphasized as he fitted Elena with the tiny camera disguised as a jacket button, is that you don't do anything to make them suspicious. If you see Miguel, you keep your reaction minimal. Don't call out to him. Don't try to make contact. Just verify his presence and get out. We'll handle the rest. At 2 p.m., they departed for the warehouse district. Elena rode with Vincent in an unremarkable sedan, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The familiar city landscape gradually transformed as they drove south, the gleaming towers of the financial district giving way to older industrial areas where vacant lots competed with brick warehouses and forgotten factories. You're very brave, Vincent said quietly as he drove. Most people would have fallen apart by now. I don't feel brave, Elena admitted. I feel terrified, but Miguel needs me to hold it together, so that's what I'm doing. That's the definition of courage, acting despite the fear. Vincent was silent for a moment, his hands steady on the steering wheel. I had a sister once, Isabella. She was 5 years younger than me. This was a long time ago, before I became what I am now. We grew up in a neighborhood not unlike this one. Rough, but we looked out for each other. Elena sensed he was sharing something important, something he rarely spoke about. She waited. When I was 22, some people had an issue with our father. Instead of coming after him directly, they went after Isabella. She was 17. They took her to force my father's hand in a business dispute. Vincent's jaw tightened. My father, he was old school. He believed in handling things through proper channels, through negotiation. He thought he could reason with them, make a deal. So he followed their instructions, did exactly what they said. What happened? Elena asked softly. They kept escalating demands. More money, more concessions. Every time my father gave them what they wanted, they asked for more. And meanwhile, Isabella was terrified and alone, and we couldn't do anything because we were playing by their rules. He pulled to a stop at a red light and finally looked at Elena. By the time my father realized negotiation wasn't working, by the time he was ready to take direct action, it was too late. They'd already... She didn't make it home. Vincent, I'm so sorry. That was the moment I understood something fundamental about this world. Vincent continued, his voice hollow with old pain. Sometimes you can't play by the rules. Sometimes the people you're dealing with don't respect anything but power and determination. I swore that day I would never hesitate again. Never wait for permission or the right moment when someone I cared about was in danger. He met her eyes. That's why I'm helping you, Elena. Because I see in you the same fierce love I felt for my sister. And this time, we're not going to be too late. The light changed and they continued driving. Elena felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. She understood now. This wasn't just about helping an employee. This was Vincent's chance at redemption, at rewriting an ending that had haunted him for years. They pulled up to the surveillance van 2 blocks from the target warehouse. Thomas was inside with 2 other team members, all monitoring multiple screens showing different angles of the area. The warehouse complex was enormous, a sprawling collection of connected buildings, many with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. But the central structure, the one registered to Marcus Chen's shell company, looked more maintained with newer locks on the doors and intact windows. "We've got movement," one of Thomas's team members reported. "Someone just left the north entrance. Adult male, carrying garbage bags to a dumpster." The screen showed grainy footage of a man in his 30s, looking around nervously before quickly disposing of the bags and hurrying back inside. "That's our confirmation of occupancy," Thomas said. "Elena, you're up. Remember, you're a delivery driver who got turned around. You're checking building numbers to find the right address. Keep moving, stay confident, but don't linger in any one spot too long." Vincent handed her a clipboard with fake delivery paperwork. "Your cover story is solid. If anyone confronts you, apologize and leave immediately. Don't argue. Don't try to be heroic. Just get out." Elena nodded, her mouth dry. They'd given her a delivery company jacket and baseball cap to complete the disguise. The camera in her jacket button was active, streaming to the monitors in both vehicles. "We're with you every step of the way," Vincent assured her. "I'll be watching everything you see. If anything feels wrong, if you sense any danger, just say the phrase, 'I must have the wrong address,' and walk away immediately. We'll extract you." Elena stepped out of the van, clutching the clipboard. The October afternoon was cold, and the wind whipping through the industrial area carried the smell of the nearby river and rust. She began walking toward the warehouse complex, forcing herself to maintain the casual pace of someone doing a routine job, rather than a mother searching desperately for her stolen child. Through the earpiece Thomas had given her, she heard Vincent's voice. "Good, you're doing great. The north entrance is 40 yards ahead on your right. See if you can get a look through any of the ground floor windows." Elena approached the building, making a show of checking building numbers against her fake delivery slip. The first few windows were too grimy to see through clearly, showing only vague shapes of empty interior spaces. But as she rounded the corner to the east side of the building, she found a cleaner window that looked into what appeared to be a former office area. Her heart stopped. There, visible through the window, sitting on a folding chair in the corner of the room, was Miguel. He looked small and frightened, his clothes rumpled, but he appeared unharmed. A woman sat nearby, not threatening him, just watching. Miguel was drawing something on a piece of paper the same way he did at home when he was nervous or scared. "I see him," Elena whispered, barely able to breathe. "Vincent, I see my son. Don't react." Vincent's voice was steady in her ear, an anchor in the storm of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Keep moving. Act natural. You've got your confirmation. Now get out of there." But Elena couldn't move. After 36 hours of terror and helplessness, seeing Miguel alive and relatively safe made her legs weak with relief. Tears blurred her vision, and then Miguel looked up, directly at the window. Their eyes met through the glass. She saw his face transform. Confusion, recognition, desperate hope. His mouth opened, forming the word, "Mama," and he stood up, dropping his drawing paper. "Elena, move now," Vincent commanded urgently. "He's reacting. They're going to notice." The woman supervising Miguel turned to see what had caught his attention. Helena forced herself to break eye contact, to turn away and walk back toward the street with purposeful strides, every instinct screaming at her to smash through that window and grab her son. "Stay calm," Vincent continued in her ear. "You're just a delivery driver. Wrong building. Keep walking." Behind her, Elena heard a door opening. "Hey, you! What are you doing?" She kept walking, not looking back, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. "I said stop." The voice was closer now, angry. Elena turned, summoning every ounce of acting ability she possessed. "Sorry, wrong address. I'm looking for 2847 Industrial Drive." The man who'd confronted her was in his 40s with suspicious eyes and an aggressive posture. He studied her carefully, looking for any sign of deception. "You're way off. That's 3 blocks north. My GPS must be broken. Sorry for the confusion." Elena gestured vaguely toward the street. "I'll get out of your hair." She turned and continued walking, every muscle tense, waiting for him to call after her again or worse. But the only sound was the wind, and her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Keep going," Vincent coached. "Almost there. Don't look back." Elena made it to the van and climbed inside, her legs finally giving out. She collapsed into a seat, shaking uncontrollably. Vincent was there instantly, having left his vehicle. "You did it. Elena, you did it. We know where Miguel is now." We can plan the extraction. He saw me. Elena gasped through tears. He knows I'm trying to save him. He knows he's not alone, and that might give him the strength to hold on a little longer. Vincent agreed. Thomas, we need to move fast. They're going to be more alert now. We have maybe a 4-hour window before they consider relocating. The team sprang into action. Thomas pulled up building schematics on his computer, identifying entry points and exit routes. Vincent made rapid phone calls, assembling additional personnel. Elena watched it all through a haze of exhaustion and adrenaline, unable to fully process that they'd found Miguel, that he was so close. There are complications, Thomas reported grimly. The building has been fortified more than we expected. Security cameras at all entrances, reinforced doors, probably alarm systems, and we counted at least 4 adults inside, maybe more. A direct approach is going to be difficult. Then we don't go direct, Vincent said. We create a diversion, something that forces them to split their attention, maybe even evacuate. Thomas, what about the building's infrastructure? Old electrical system, older plumbing. If we could trigger a maintenance emergency, flooding, power failure, it might work. Over the next 2 hours, they refined a plan that felt equal parts precise and desperate. They would create a controlled situation in an adjacent building that would appear to threaten the entire complex. Nothing dangerous, but dramatic enough to make the kidnappers consider temporarily moving Miguel. When they emerged, Vincent's team would be ready. It's risky, Thomas warned. If they panic, if they decide to abandon him, they won't, Vincent said with certainty. They need him alive for the ransom. He's their leverage, but we need to move soon. Elena, we'll need you for one more thing. Anything, she said immediately. When they call for the ransom exchange, and they will, probably within the next few hours, you need to sound completely compliant. No hint that you know where Miguel is. No indication that we're planning anything. Can you do that? Elena nodded. I can do whatever it takes to bring my son home. As if on cue, her phone rang. Unknown number. Everyone in the van fell silent. Elena answered, her hand steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Mrs. Rivera, came the distorted voice. Time to discuss final arrangements. Do you have the money? I'm working on it. Elena lied smoothly. I just need a little more time. Please, I'm doing everything I can. You have 12 hours. Midnight tonight. We'll send you the location at 11:30 p.m. Come alone. No tricks, no games. Just you, the money, and you get your son back. I'll be there, Elena promised. Please don't hurt him. I'll do exactly what you say. Midnight, Mrs. Rivera. Don't be late. The call ended. Elena looked up at Vincent and Thomas. They're moving up the timeline. We're out of time. Vincent's expression was grim, but resolute. Then we move now. Thomas, activate the team. We're going in tonight before that midnight deadline. One way or another, we're bringing Miguel home. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Elena stayed in the surveillance van, watching on screens as Vincent's people moved into position around the warehouse complex. The sun set, painting the industrial district in shades of orange and shadow. And somewhere in that building, Miguel waited, unaware that his rescue was about to begin. Elena, Vincent said, appearing at the van door. He changed into dark tactical clothing and looked every inch the dangerous man people whispered about. When this starts, it's going to happen fast. Stay here with Thomas. No matter what you see or hear, stay in this van until we give the all clear, understand? Be careful, Elena said. And Vincent, thank you for everything. He nodded once, then disappeared into the gathering darkness. The operation was about to begin. Darkness settled over the warehouse district like a heavy blanket, the only illumination coming from scattered streetlights and the distant glow of Chicago's downtown skyline. Inside the surveillance van, Elena sat rigid with tension, her eyes fixed on the multiple monitors displaying feeds from cameras positioned around the target building. Her phone sat on the console in front of her, waiting for the promised location message that would come at 11:30 p.m., a message she would never need to answer if everything went according to plan. Thomas Wade sat beside her, speaking quietly into his headset, coordinating the movements of Vincent's team. Alpha team, confirm position. Bravo team, status on the infrastructure plan. Through the speakers, voices responded in clipped, professional tones. Elena recognized Vincent's voice among them, calm and commanding despite the danger he was walking into. In position at the northeast corner, thermal imaging shows 5 heat signatures inside. 4 adults, 1 child-sized, 2nd floor, east quadrant. Elena's breath caught. That was Miguel. The confirmation sent both relief and terror through her system. So close, yet still beyond reach. Thermal's not showing any weapons, another voice reported. They appear to be relying on concealment rather than force. That tracks with their profile, Thomas muttered. They're playing a careful game. No unnecessary risk, no escalation. They genuinely believe they're getting that ransom money. How long until the diversion? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas checked his watch. 12 minutes. The adjacent building's sprinkler system is going to experience a catastrophic failure. Nothing dangerous, but enough water and alarm noise to make them think twice about staying put. When they move Miguel, we intercept. And if they don't move him? Thomas's expression was grave. Then we adapt. Vincent's prepared for multiple scenarios. Elena turned her attention back to the monitors, watching shadowy figures move into position around the warehouse complex. They looked like ghosts in their dark clothing, communicating through hand signals she couldn't interpret. One of them was Vincent. She couldn't tell which from this distance, but knowing he was out there putting himself at risk for her son made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena found herself remembering the first time she'd seen Vincent Moretti, 6 months ago when she'd started working at his estate. He'd been a distant figure then, intimidating and untouchable, the kind of man whose world seemed completely separate from hers. She'd never imagined she would be sitting in a surveillance van, watching him orchestrate a rescue operation for her child. Life changed so fast. 48 hours ago, her biggest worry had been making rent. Now she was allied with a man most people feared, trusting him with the most precious thing in her world. 2 minutes, Thomas announced. All teams, prepare for infrastructure event. Elena's hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Through the audio feed she could hear Vincent's breathing, steady, controlled, the breathing of someone who had done this before, who knew how to manage fear and channel it into focus. 30 seconds. Elena closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to whatever might be listening. Please, please let this work. Event initiated, Thomas said. Through the monitors, Elena saw lights activate in the building adjacent to the warehouse. Emergency strobes that cut through the darkness. Seconds later, water began pouring from the structure's exits, and a piercing alarm split the night air. They're reacting. Vincent's voice came through the speakers. I see movement inside the target building. Someone just looked out the north window. Thomas leaned forward, studying the thermal imaging display. Come on, come on. Make the smart choice. Get the asset out of there. For a terrible, endless minute, nothing happened. The alarm continued shrieking. Water continued flowing, but the heat signatures inside the warehouse remained stationary. They're not moving, Elena whispered, panic rising in her throat. Why aren't they moving? Wait. Vincent's voice was tense but controlled. North door opening. 2 subjects emerging. 1 male, 1 female. The female is carrying... That's a child, Thomas confirmed, zooming in on the thermal image. They're evacuating him. All teams, prepare for interception. Remember, minimal confrontation. We get the boy clear first, everything else is secondary. Elena watched breathlessly as the thermal images moved across the screen. The 2 adults were heading toward a van parked near the warehouse's north side. The smaller figure, Miguel, held between them. Vincent's team began converging, moving with practiced precision through the shadows. On my mark, Vincent's voice commanded. 3, 2, 1, now. What happened next unfolded so quickly that Elena struggled to process it all. Dark figures emerged from multiple directions, surrounding the 2 kidnappers and their vehicle. There was shouting, commands to stop, to put the child down, to not make this harder than it needed to be. Through the audio feed, Elena heard a woman's voice, high with panic. Stay back, or what? Vincent's voice cut through the chaos, calm but carrying an unmistakable threat. You're surrounded. Your partners inside are contained. Your escape route is blocked. You have exactly one option here. Set the boy down and step away. Make any other choice and I promise you'll regret it. You don't understand, the woman said, and Elena could hear genuine fear beneath the defiance. If we don't deliver, if we fail, I don't care about your problems, Vincent interrupted. I care about that child. Set him down, now. There was a long, terrible pause. Then, through the grainy video feed from one of the team's body cameras, Elena saw Miguel being lowered to the ground. The moment his feet touched pavement, he ran. Not toward the kidnappers, not toward Vincent's team, but toward the one person he'd been hoping for. "Mama!" Miguel's voice cut through the night, and Elena was out of the van before Thomas could stop her. She ran toward her son, her feet pounding against broken pavement, her vision blurred with tears. Miguel crashed into her arms, and Elena dropped to her knees, holding him so tightly she was afraid she might hurt him, but unable to loosen her grip. "Baby, baby, I'm here," she sobbed into his hair, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid reality of his small body pressed against hers. "I'm here. You're safe now. You're safe." Miguel was crying too, his hands fisted in her jacket. "I was so scared, Mama. They said I couldn't go home. They said, 'Shh, I know, sweetheart, but it's over now. It's over." Around them, Vincent's team was securing the two kidnappers, speaking into radios, managing the aftermath of the operation. But Elena was aware of none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the weight of her son in her arms, the sound of his breathing, the miracle of having him back. Then Vincent was there, crouching beside them. His face was streaked with dirt, and there was a cut above his left eyebrow that was bleeding slightly, but his eyes were soft with an emotion Elena had never seen in them before. "Miguel," Vincent said gently, "my name is Vincent. I'm a friend of your mother's. Are you hurt anywhere? Did anyone harm you?" Miguel pulled back slightly from Elena, looking at Vincent with wide, cautious eyes. "You're the man from the big house. Mama cleans there sometimes." "That's right," Vincent confirmed. "And your mama is the bravest person I know. She never stopped fighting to bring you home." "They kept me in a room," Miguel said, his voice small. "They weren't mean, but they wouldn't let me leave. They gave me food and paper to draw on. But I wanted my mama." "I know," Vincent said. "But you're with her now, that's what matters." Thomas approached, speaking quietly to Vincent. "We've secured all 5 subjects." The 3 inside came out without resistance once they realized what was happening. "No injuries on our side." "Good. Process them at the secondary location. I want to know everything. Who hired them? Why? The whole story." Vincent stood, offering his hand to Elena. "Let's get you both out of here." The ride back to the Moretti estate was surreal. Elena sat in the back of Vincent's sedan with Miguel curled against her side, his head on her shoulder. He'd fallen asleep within minutes, exhausted from 2 days of fear and stress. Elena kept one hand on his back, needing the constant reassurance that he was really there, really safe. Vincent drove in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at them. When they arrived at the estate, he carried Miguel inside. The boy barely stirred, and led Elena to a comfortable guest suite on the 2nd floor. "You'll both stay here tonight," Vincent said, laying Miguel gently on the bed. "It's secure, and honestly, you shouldn't be alone right now. Tomorrow we'll discuss next steps, but tonight just rest. Be with your son." "Vincent," Elena started, not sure what she wanted to say. "Thank you" felt inadequate. "I owe you everything" felt too dramatic. "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to say anything," Vincent interrupted softly. "Just knowing he's safe is enough." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a phone on the nightstand. Press 1 if you need anything. Mrs. Chen is aware of the situation. She'll bring clothes and anything else you might need." After he left, Elena removed Miguel's shoes and covered him with a soft blanket. She lay down beside him, watching his face in the dim light from the hallway, still not quite believing this nightmare was over. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with just 4 words. Midnight deadline just passed. The kidnappers' promised call would never come. They were in custody now. Their plan collapsed. Elena deleted the message and turned off her phone. She must have dozed off because she woke to find morning light streaming through the windows, and Miguel sitting up in bed, looking around the unfamiliar room with confused eyes. "Mama, where are we?" "We're at Mr. Moretti's house, baby. Remember? He's the one who helped bring you home." Miguel nodded slowly, memory returning. "The people who took me, they're not coming back?" "No, sweetheart. They're never coming back. You're safe now." A soft knock at the door announced Mrs. Chen, who entered with a tray of breakfast and clothes in Miguel's size. "Good morning, Elena. I thought the young man might be hungry." She set the tray on a table near the window. Pancakes, fresh fruit, orange juice. "Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you when you're ready. No rush. The boy is welcome to explore the garden under supervision if he likes." An hour later, after Miguel had eaten and been taken outside by one of the household staff to see the fountain and the koi pond, Elena made her way to Vincent's study. She found him at his desk, on the phone, but he gestured for her to enter and ended his call. "How is he?" Vincent asked immediately. Better than I expected. Children are resilient. Elena sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd sat 3 nights ago, delivering her desperate plea. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. Have you learned anything from the people you arrested? Vincent's expression darkened. Quite a bit, actually. And none of it is good news. He pulled up a file on his computer, turning the screen so Elena could see. The 5 people we apprehended are professional contractors, as we suspected. They were hired through an intermediary, Marcus Chen, the financial consultant I mentioned. But Chen was working for someone else. He clicked through several images until he reached a photograph of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. This is Richard Blackwell. He owns a portfolio of properties throughout Chicago, including several in the Gold Coast neighborhood. On the surface, he's a legitimate businessman. Beneath that surface, he's been engaged in various questionable activities for decades. I don't understand, Elena said. What does this man have to do with me or Miguel? That's the question that took most of the night to answer. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Blackwell has been trying to acquire my estate for years. The property sits on land he wants for a development project. I've refused every offer, so Blackwell decided to get creative. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. He orchestrated the kidnapping to get to you. Partially. His plan had 2 phases. First, he had surveillance equipment planted in my house to gather information he could use against me. Business details, personal vulnerabilities, anything that might give him leverage. During that surveillance, his people overheard you talking about Miguel with Mrs. Chen. You mentioned his school, his schedule, everything they needed. Vincent's jaw tightened with barely contained anger. Blackwell realized he could use Miguel as a pressure point. If you came to me for help, which he correctly predicted you would, I would be forced to either involve official law enforcement, which would bring unwanted scrutiny to my operations, or handle it privately, which could create exposure and vulnerability. Either way, Blackwell thought he could use the situation to his advantage. But why demand ransom from me if the real target was you? Misdirection. If the kidnapping appeared to be purely about money from you, I might not look deeper into the real motivations. And if you somehow managed to pay the ransom without my help, Blackwell would still get his money and could try a different approach to pressure me. Vincent's expression was cold with the kind of anger that was more frightening for being controlled. He gambled with a child's life as part of a business maneuver. That's unforgivable. Elena felt sick. What happens now? To Blackwell? To the people who took Miguel? The 5 contractors are no longer a concern. They're being held at a location where they'll be encouraged to provide detailed testimony about everything they know. As for Blackwell, Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. Richard Blackwell's business empire is about to experience catastrophic problems. Regulatory investigations, financial audits, partners suddenly discovering they've been defrauded. By the time I'm finished, he'll be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment, much less a development project. Is that legal? Elena asked, then immediately felt foolish. Vincent had never pretended to operate entirely within legal boundaries. The investigations will be entirely legitimate. I'm simply ensuring they happen, and that certain information reaches the right people. Blackwell has been breaking laws for years. He just had enough money and connections to avoid consequences. That protection is gone now. Vincent stood and moved to the window looking out over his estate. There is, however, a complication. The 5 people we arrested know I was involved in Miguel's rescue. That connects me to what could be considered an unlawful detention, even though our cause was just. If any of them decide to provide testimony to authorities, you could face legal trouble, Elena finished. Because you helped me. I knew the risks when I agreed to help. I made my choice, and I'd make it again. He turned to face her. But it does mean I need to be strategic about how this situation resolves. The contractors will be released, but not before they understand the consequences of speaking about any of this. Blackwell will be too busy defending himself from legal problems to cause further issues. And you and Miguel? He paused, and for the first time since Elena had met him, Vincent Moretti looked uncertain. What about us? Elena prompted. You're not safe in your current apartment. Blackwell knows where you live, and even with his attention diverted, there are others who might see you as a loose end. Additionally, your connection to me is now known to people who could use that information harmfully. Elena felt her heart sink. So what are you saying? That we need to leave Chicago? Go into hiding? No. Vincent moved back to his desk, pulling out a folder. I'm saying I want you and Miguel to stay here. There are guest quarters in the East Wing that could easily be converted into a private residence. Miguel would be safe. You'd have security and, frankly, he hesitated again, that uncertainty flickering across his features. I'd feel better knowing you were both protected. Elena stared at him, trying to process this. You're offering us a place to live? Here? More than that. Vincent opened the folder, revealing documents. I'm offering you a position managing my legitimate business operations. The real estate holdings, investments, charitable foundations. You'd be doing actual work, not just accepting charity. The salary would be competitive, enough to build real financial security. Miguel could attend better schools, you'd both have stability. Vincent, why would you do all this? He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of emotion Elena had never heard from him before. Because somewhere in the past 72 hours while we were fighting to save your son, I realized something. I've spent 20 years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance, telling myself that power and control were enough. But watching you, your courage, your fierce love for Miguel, your refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless, it reminded me of what actually matters. Vincent met her eyes directly. I care about you, Elena, and I care about Miguel. These aren't feelings I'm accustomed to, and honestly, they're somewhat terrifying, but they're real, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise or to let something important slip away because I was too afraid to take the risk. Elena's breath caught. She thought about this man who everyone feared, who had risked everything to help her, who had shown her more kindness and support in 3 days than most people showed in a lifetime. She thought about the pain in his voice when he'd told her about his sister, about the careful way he'd carried Miguel inside, about the fact that he could have done the minimum and paid the ransom but instead had chosen to fight. I care about you too, she admitted quietly. I didn't expect to. I didn't even want to, honestly, but I do. You're not the man people think you are, Vincent. Or maybe you are, but you're also more than that. Then stay, Vincent said simply. Not because you owe me anything. You don't. Not because you're afraid or have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to see where this goes. Because you want to build something better for Miguel. Because maybe, possibly, we could be good for each other. Elena thought about her cramped apartment, about working 3 jobs and still never having enough, about the constant fear of something going wrong with no safety net to catch her. She thought about Miguel growing up here, safe and secure, with opportunities she'd never been able to provide. She thought about Vincent, about the connection that had formed between them in the crucible of crisis. I need to talk to Miguel, she said finally. This affects him too. He gets a say in this. Of course, Vincent agreed. Take whatever time you need. The offer stands regardless. Elena found Miguel in the garden throwing breadcrumbs to the koi fish under the watchful eye of one of the household staff. His face lit up when he saw her. Mama, did you see these fish? They're huge. And there's a garden maze. And Mr. Moretti said maybe I could see it later if it's okay with you. Elena sat on the bench near the pond, pulling Miguel close. Baby, we need to talk about something important. Mr. Moretti has offered us a place to stay here. At his house. Not just visiting, actually living here. What do you think about that? Miguel considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. Would I have my own room? Yes, you would. And could I bring Captain Whiskers? I miss him. I'm sure we could arrange for Captain Whiskers to come too. Would you be happy here, Mama? Miguel asked, showing the perceptiveness that always surprised her. You seem different when you're around Mr. Moretti, like you're not as tired. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I think I could be happy here, but only if you're comfortable with it. This is your decision too. Miguel looked around the garden, at the fountain and the flowers and the vast lawn stretching toward the house. Then he looked back at his mother. That man saved me, didn't he? Mr. Moretti? He did. Then I think we should stay, because people who save you are probably good people, and you deserve to be around good people, Mama. Elena pulled him into a hug, overwhelmed by her son's wisdom. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Miguel said matter-of-factly. You just forget because I'm small. That afternoon, Elena accepted Vincent's offer. The logistics of moving their minimal possessions from the apartment to the estate took less than a day. Mrs. Chen supervised the transformation of the East Wing guest quarters into a private residence, somehow knowing exactly what Elena and Miguel needed before they asked. Captain Whiskers was retrieved from the neighbor who'd been feeding him and installed in the new quarters, where he immediately claimed the sunniest windowsill as his territory. Miguel enrolled in a prestigious private school with small class sizes and a science program that made his eyes light up with excitement. Elena began learning the intricacies of Vincent's legitimate business operations, discovering she had a talent for organization and analysis she'd never had the opportunity to develop. The weeks that followed were an adjustment. Elena had to learn to accept help, to stop working herself to exhaustion, to believe that this new stability was real and not something that would be snatched away. Miguel had nightmares sometimes, waking up calling for her, but they became less frequent as time passed and he felt safer. And Vincent was patient in a way Elena hadn't expected. He didn't push for more than she was ready to give. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes with Miguel and sometimes alone. They talked about everything: her dreams for Miguel's future, his complicated relationship with his parents, their favorite books and movies, the small details that built intimacy slowly and surely. 2 months after Miguel's rescue, on a cold December evening, Elena found Vincent in his study working late as usual. She knocked softly on the open door. "Do you have a minute?" Vincent looked up, and his entire expression softened when he saw her. "For you? Always." Elena entered, closing the door behind her. "I wanted to give you something." She held out a small wrapped package. Vincent opened it carefully, revealing a framed photograph. It showed him in the garden with Miguel, teaching the boy how to identify different types of trees. Elena had taken it secretly a week earlier, capturing a moment of genuine warmth and connection between them. "Miguel wanted me to thank you," Elena explained, "for everything you've done. But more than that, he wanted you to know that he thinks of you as family now. And so do I." Vincent stared at the photograph, and Elena was stunned to see his eyes glisten with emotion. "Family," he repeated softly. "I haven't had that in a very long time." "You have it now," Elena said, moving closer. "If you want it." Vincent set the frame carefully on his desk and stood, closing the distance between them. "Elena, these past 2 months with you and Miguel, they've been the best of my life. I know this started in crisis, I know the circumstances were terrible, but what's grown from it is real," Elena finished. "I know. I feel it too. I don't want to rush you," Vincent continued. "I know you've been through trauma, and Miguel needs stability, but I need you to know that this isn't temporary for me. What I feel for you, for your son, it's permanent. It's the kind of thing I'd fight for, the kind of thing I'd protect with everything I have." Elena reached up, touching his face gently. "I know, and that's why I'm here, because I trust you, Vincent, because you've shown me who you really are when it matters most, because I want to see where this goes, without fear, without holding back." Vincent leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning, like the answer to questions neither of them had known how to ask. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "So what happens now?" Vincent asked. "Now?" Elena laughed softly. "Now we figure it out together, one day at a time. No more crisis, no more desperate measures. Just life, a real life, for all of us." "I like the sound of that," Vincent murmured, pulling her close again. Downstairs, Miguel was probably reading one of his library books about stars and planets. Captain Whiskers curled at his feet. The house was warm and safe, filled with the promise of better tomorrows. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the gentle hope of happiness. Not the fierce hope born from crisis, but the steady hope built from trust. The kind of hope that whispered that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them, and the best was yet to come. Epilogue. 6 months later, spring came to Chicago with a flourish of cherry blossoms and warming breezes. The Moretti Estates gardens were in full bloom, and in the center of it all a small party was underway. Miguel's 8th birthday celebration was modest by the standards of the wealthy neighborhood, but it was perfect for a boy who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. Elena stood on the terrace watching Vincent help Miguel and 3 of his new school friends navigate the garden maze. The man who terrified half of Chicago was currently wearing a party hat and making exaggerated monster noises while children shrieked with delighted laughter. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, carrying a tray of lemonade. "He's good with the boy," she observed, in her typical understated way. "He is," Elena agreed, smiling. "And you're happy, Elena?" "Truly, truly," Elena confirmed. "More than I ever thought possible." Mrs. Chen nodded with satisfaction. "Good. This house has been too quiet for too long. It needs life. It needs laughter." She glanced at Elena with uncharacteristic warmth. "It needs family." As if sensing their attention, Vincent looked up from the maze and met Elena's eyes across the garden. Even from this distance she could see the love in his expression, the contentment that had replaced the loneliness she'd sensed in him when they first met. That night after the party ended and Miguel fell asleep with cake sugar still on his fingers, Elena and Vincent sat together in the study where this had all begun. The note she'd written, that desperate plea that changed everything, was framed on Vincent's desk now, a reminder of where they'd started and how far they'd come. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "For what?" Vincent asked, pulling her closer. "For taking a chance on a desperate woman with a note. For saving my son. For giving us a life I never dared to dream about." "Elena," Vincent said seriously, "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. You had the courage to ask for help, the strength to face danger, the love to never give up. All I did was provide resources. Everything else? That was you." "Then let's say we saved each other," Elena suggested. "Because I think that's more accurate anyway." Vincent smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile he only showed her and Miguel. "I'll accept that compromise." Outside the study windows, Chicago glittered in the darkness. A city of millions going about their lives, unaware of the quiet miracle that had unfolded in one of its grand mansions. A miracle born not from magic or fate, but from desperate courage meeting unexpected compassion. From a maid's note to a powerful man. From a crisis that could have destroyed them to a bond that made them stronger. From fear to trust. From strangers to family. And in the end, that was the greatest rescue of all. Not just Miguel's liberation from kidnappers, but 3 wounded souls finding in each other the home they'd all been searching for. The most feared man in Chicago had learned to love again. The struggling single mother had found security and partnership. And a 7-year-old boy, now 8, would grow up knowing that sometimes when the world seems darkest, help comes from the most unexpected places. All because a desperate woman slipped a note to a dangerous man, and he chose to be something more than what everyone believed him to be. He chose to be a hero. He chose to be hers.